Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today we have Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, the divorce doctor, joining us again. Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth, for coming back.
So happy to be here. This is one of the most fun places for me to talk.
Well, for me too, we were just saying you and I have not had a chance to catch up lately because you have been busy. You have been a busy, busy lady. I want to let people know a few of the exciting things that are coming in the future or have just happened for you. You have your New York City private practice and your Afterglow program. But what people don't know is you also just launched, by the time this episode airs, you just launched your podcast, The
Mm-hmm.
Divorce Doctor, and you have your book coming out in April. Yay! These are
Yes.
such exciting things. So tell us about both the podcast and the book.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm so happy to talk to your audience about it. So, the podcast is called The Divorce Doctor. And on it, I interview women and men who've gone through the divorce experience to hear about both the struggle, but also the healing that they went through. I created it because when I was going through a divorce, I felt so alone. I didn't feel like my story was being experienced by anyone else. And while everyone's story is a little bit different, there's commonalities. And so we need people, especially strong people, to share their struggles. And I had the absolute honor of my first interview being with you, Susan. And it was so cool to hear a divorce attorney's divorce story. So that's the kind of thing you're going to hear.
Well, and I have to tell you, it was a really interesting experience for me because when I'm interviewed, usually people are interviewing me based on my areas of expertise. They want to hear about divorce law, or they want to hear about mediation. And you and I were talking about my divorce and
Yeah.
my experience of it, which I do think maybe it's the only divorce I've ever had, so it's the only perspective I have of divorce, at least for myself. But it was a very interesting thing for me to realize. It actually brought home for me how much my own divorce then impacted my practice of divorce as I
Mm,
went forward in positive ways, I will say. So, and I know that's in the episode. And
yes.
then your book, which I have had the pleasure of
Mm,
reading. So I'm so
thank
excited
you.
for this to come out for people.
Thank you. Me too. So, my book is called The Light at the Other Side of Divorce, Discovering the New You. And it is really a complete healing package on how to move through your life after and during your divorce to heal, thrive, and grow. And in the book, there are chapters covering all topics related to divorce, dating, co parenting, living in a new house on your own. And then there are actionable steps you can take. So I like to say that, if you don't have time for therapy, you don't have the money for therapy, please pick up this book and get working. You can have such a better experience than you're having right now.
Well, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how people can pre order the book and
Yes.
some special benefits they will get from you if they pre order the book. We'll talk about that at the end of the episode. So stick around to the end so that you get that information. And I just wanted to say, I just interviewed Karen Millen. We were just talking about this. And one of the things she pointed out is that therapy and dealing with trauma and healing is so important, but it is often outside the financial reach for so many people. And that is a reason why your book is going to be just so helpful. And I will also say why Afterglow, your program, is also such a wonderful resource because it's available at a very accessible cost for people.
Exactly, exactly. And I know that going through a divorce, people told me that I could charge a lot of money, up in the eight, 10 over $10,000 for the online program. But I know how hard and how tight money is during the divorce, and because people do end up spending that much on therapy. But both the book is if you have a library, if the book is there, take it out. You don't have to spend a dime, because I don't want people to have to stretch to heal. Because the more people who can heal through divorce, the better this whole world can be, and we can stop the stigma of divorce. So I'm so happy that both the course is available for people who want more interactive with me. The book is going to be available for those who like to do it on their own. And the podcast will be there so that people can really hear actual stories of healing.
So that is why we have not been able to catch up
Right.
with each other lately. We've had a couple things
A little
going
busy.
on. Yeah, a little busy, but all to the good and all in furtherance of something that you and I are both very passionate about, which is,
Yes.
the positive transition through divorce and a better life after. And that's actually, we were talking about what we wanted to talk about today. And there's been a story playing out in the news over the past couple of months, I would say, although it's been, spotty through the past few years, about Kim Kardashian West and Kanye West and their marriage, their trials and tribulations as things have hit some rocky times, and recently a large number of articles about perhaps they're at the point of divorce. And putting aside the fascination that people have with celebrity divorces and marriages and relationships, I really thought that this was a great opportunity to talk about something that is an intersection between both our worlds, because mental health issues and divorce go hand in hand. I mean, they are, as a divorce attorney for 30 some odd years, I would say more of my cases have had somebody with a diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health condition or issue, because there's something about dealing with a mental health issue that puts strain on divorces. In fact, I found a statistic that they're 2 times more likely to divorce if there's a mental health issue or diagnosis in the relationship for one of the parties. And of course, mental health is your world. So it's been talked about quite a bit. And I think actually during one of the incidents that was happening and playing out in the press, Kim Kardashian West talked about the fact that Kanye has a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. And that is something that I've become familiar with, because that very commonly, I think, in fact, I saw a statistic that said 90% of marriages where one of the parties has a bipolar diagnosis. Psychology Today had an article about that there was a 90% chance that might lead to divorce. So I wanted to talk with you about this, because that means, with those statistics and with what you and I both see in this world, that a lot of people who are listening to us either are dealing with a mental health disorder on their own in their relationship, or are dealing with a spouse or romantic partner with a mental health diagnosis. And that makes it infinitely, what's already difficult, infinitely more difficult, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I do want to say also that, mental health struggles are really, like many diseases that we talk about. When I'm talking to clients about medication management or therapy management, I often use the example of diabetes. And with diabetes, you have to keep your sugar at a certain level. And we know for diabetes, things like stress will exacerbate it. And so I want to point out to people too that if you have a vulnerability or a pre-existing condition of any mental health struggle, all research shows that stressful experiences like divorce are going to exacerbate your symptoms. So it's really important also, if you are the person who's having a lot of mental health concerns, to know that it makes perfect sense that you would be having more symptomatology. I've worked with people who feel like, wait, I thought I had worked through this depression. I thought I had worked through some of my manic phases, and now they're back. And I really want people to know not to be too afraid. We never go back. We simply learn from where we are. And so it is happening because of this stress. And I think that, what came first is complicated. But I just want people to know that it makes sense that your symptomatology would be higher and more intense.
That actually, I mean, it makes perfect sense that it would go up. And I think maybe the takeaway from that is you need, if you are do have a diagnosis, if you are medicated or in therapy, it's time to get to your clinician.
Very good point. Yes. I think that's right. I think a lot of people who are, clinically stable on medication or therapy, I mean, a lot of people I've worked with, we've done some intensive work. They've really moved through a lot of their struggles. They have coping skills. They have behavioral plans of how they're going to handle things. take a break from therapy, or take a, usually you wouldn't take a break from medication, but take less time seeing your psychiatrist or psychopharmacologist, let's say. And so I would even encourage, Susan, I mean, we know this, and I talk about this on my podcast, that, so much of the distress comes way before the divorce, right? So the moment, I would really say the moment you notice any symptomatology coming up again, you don't have to figure out if is this my depressive disorder? Is this my bipolar disorder? Is this the relationship? Just know something is up and we need some guidance and some help. And I'm speaking now also to the people who have the mental health issue, because very often, if you're open, which is great, about your diagnosis, you might get pigeonholed or scapegoated by your ex or your soon to be ex. And yes, I want to be really clear. People who have mental health issues, that might contribute to the problems in the relationship, but there's lots of other things. And so we really want to be clear for the partner or the person who has the mental health issue about separating out the different pieces, right? So yes, in the Kanye and Kim situation, he has had, manic episodes, and that they have been disruptive for her. But if that was the single only thing that was happening, my guess is it would be different. So I really want to kind of put this in the context that it isn't like you press a button, somebody reacts poorly, and then the whole marriage dissolves. And I want to say that for both partners. I don't want to put the pressure on the mental health issue. Does that make sense, Susan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you actually just made another good point in there, that I want people to understand. What I see often from the legal side as being, the attorney in the mix, is I will have clients who do have a diagnosis or do have a condition. They are finding that there are exacerbated symptoms, but they do not want to reach out for help because they are afraid it will be used against them in the litigation or in the divorce process. And, as an attorney, what I always tell them is it's not, what will get used against you will be the symptomology. If it's playing out in a way that then affects your household, affects your behaviors, affects your children,
Exactly.
that's what's going to come out. If you go get help or are seeking treatment, then you are much less likely to find that a court is going to look on it as something that is a problem in maybe your parents.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. The court, you and I have talked about this, it's very black and white. They're not nuanced at all. So if they see that you're having symptomatology and you have a therapist, I know because I'm a therapist to many people in this circumstance, just check and move on. They're just, that's all they want to see. And so treatment is not a sign of weakness. It is not a sign of failure. It is a sign, similarly to taking your insulin, of being proactive about a health condition. And I think that, it's really important to have a clinician who's working with you, who understands and works with people who have that same condition. So if you are someone who has depression and you start working with a therapist, or some people work with a coach who doesn't have a history of working with people with clinical depression, you do not want to be there. I have talked, I believe, on this program before about you are the customer. We, as a therapist, are there to be interviewed by you to find out if we can provide for you what you need. There are bipolar disorder specialists, there are clinical depression specialists, there are anxiety specialists. You deserve the right person for you. And so do your kids, and so does your ex-partner. And so it's really, when we hear these stories about Kanye and Kim, I don't know any of the details of the kind of treatment they're getting, but, I know clients who have struggled with bipolar disorder and have been with clinicians who have never treated that before.
Right. And that's actually a really good point. Because I've had a number of cases over my career where one of the parties does have a bipolar diagnosis, and I, honing in on that particular diagnosis, it is a very, very tricky situation to be dealing with, because what I've found, and it kind of goes to what we were just talking about, what I've actually just seen anecdotally, is that although someone may get treatment and become regulated or have their symptoms regulated for a period of time, something might happen, a different stressor perhaps than divorce. Or I had one case where a client just gained a lot of weight, and apparently that set their medication into, wasn't as effective. And I've had many other bipolar clients or cases where someone is regulated for a period of time and then decides, well, I don't need medication anymore.
Yes, that happens a lot.
The side effects can be a real issue. So that is something to be aware of as well, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that happens. Most recurrent episodes of mania and depression come from people feeling like they're doing okay, so they can go off their medicine. And then we realize that actually we're not okay. We were okay because we were on the medicine. Okay, meaning not having the cyclical experiences of mood. So that happens a lot. And I think it's really, I mean, I would imagine for the clients that I've worked with who are going through a divorce, who have been married to someone who has a mental health issue, and then in the separation, you have less, what feels like control. It's an incredibly powerless feeling. And I think very often people might mistakenly place all the explanation of someone's behavior onto the mental illness. And while there is probably a piece of it, right? We talk about this with the, our problems with the term narcissist, right? Like there's definitely a part of it, but there are other pieces too. And so I think that's something to be really careful of, because I wonder, Susan, if people would come into your office and just have this kind of sweeping statement, they're bipolar, so therefore we can't work with them, which is not true. They might have some instances. So here's an example, I like to give. So if someone is having, first of all, most people who have what we call active bipolar 1, which is clear cyclical shifts from mania and depression, which is, I don't know the percentage, but it is not incredibly high. The manic episodes often last anywhere from 2 weeks to 3.5 weeks. So they're not, forever. People use this phrase manic, right? People often spend much more time in the depressive state. And so it's really important to realize that, 2.5 weeks in a 2-year divorce, is not going to shift everything. And so it's really important, I think, for both parties to understand the diagnosis and what's really expected. And so for example, if the signs of someone starting to get into a manic episode, so they're sleeping less, they might feel the urge to spend more money, they might be speaking more rapidly, and you have someone who you're divorcing who's this way, you can say, we're not going to have our custody meeting until I notice a shift. I mean, it's also would be sad because the shift might be into a depression, but you can think about ways of understanding the disorder and how you can really, and if you can't control the person taking their meds or not, work with it. But see, that's different than shaming the person. It's really understanding what's coming up.
I thank you for saying that about shaming the person, because that is the other experience of mental health and divorce that I deal with, and have dealt with throughout my career. Is there is you said judges are black and white. Divorcing spouses tend to be very black and white as well. Yeah. And it is a very common situation where the person with the mental health disorder, be it bipolar, be it depression, anxiety, be it alcohol abuse, drug abuse, there's a myriad of different things out there. I think there's 18 different diagnoses that contribute to divorce, according to one of the studies I read. But they make that very black and white. They are manic depressive, or they are bipolar. Therefore, it's all their fault. They're a bad parent. And, it becomes a very tunnel vision situation for people.
Yeah. It's like that, you have a glass of water and you put a little bit of food coloring and it's all of who they are, right? I read recently that really the best way to say is, this is a person who struggles with bipolar disorder, right? This is a person who struggles with bipolar disorder. It's not they're not bipolar, which is how we used to call people. Which of course is better than we used to call people when we use the word crazy, but still, right? Like it's not, they're not all bipolar, right?
Yeah,
and what I say to the people in my program, and I talk about this in the book that I want to be really clear about, is you have every right to be angry. I am sure there is some stuff that your ex did, whether it was in a manic episode, a depressed episode, an anxiety, panic attack, that really you deserve to be pissed off about. And they probably have things that they deserve to be pissed off about you. I am here to help you work through that outside of the divorce. I promise you, those are legitimate feelings. Like living with someone who has undiagnosed or untreated bipolar disorder suffers from bipolar disorder is very difficult. And we can work on that. I'm not saying you shouldn't be having a hard time with it or it shouldn't be impacting you. But when you're trying to move forward in a process that costs thousands of dollars, that impacts your children, we need to have a place to process that so that you can move fully into the process without that rage and resentment. And I think it's really important. I know we're going to talk about a listener that reached out to you, but about this, but I really want to point out that no one else can cause, cure, or change another person. I'm going to say that again. No one can cause, cure, or change another person. And it's very often, it's very likely that in your situation, if you're in this situation, you have been trying for a very long time to change the other person. And I will tell you, as a therapist, I understand. As a therapist and as someone who is married to an active alcoholic, I understand the desire. I did it too. I thought I could change him. My attempts to change him for sure made him worse, for sure made everything more unmanageable. So eventually I had to take responsibility for that behavior. So even if you're not there yet, just know there's always two sides of the street. There's always two sides of the street, and we're here to kind of think about both sides.
Well, and you know, you make such a good point. And I was looking at, just doing my research for the episode, and, there are for people who are married to or in a relationship with someone who has a mental health issue, there are three main reasons why they will delay or not separate from that person when the situation, even when it becomes intolerable or too difficult to deal with. And I always say the universe provides. I posted something that was unrelated sort of to this topic today, but somebody reached out and said in the comments that, the girl I'm dating is suicidal and depressed, and I don't like her anymore, not for any reason. I've just lost feeling for her, but she cuts a lot and she's lost all her friends and she only has me. And she's told me before that I'm genuinely the only reason she's still alive. So I can't break up with her because she would kill herself. And, first off, my heart just like squeezed when I saw that. And I thought, thank God I'm talking to Dr. Elizabeth in a few minutes. But this goes to that. There are, one of the top reasons why people will stay in relationships that are untenable for them is they feel that they are responsible for the person with the mental health problem, and that that person will get worse, hurt themselves, not get help, not take care of themselves, whatever that might be. They feel very responsible for that person. So what you just said, that it just so strikes that. But what do they say to themselves? How do they get themselves through this?
So I think we talked about this in one of our earlier episodes together that I just love doing about when someone is suicidal. So I really talk about the importance of asking specific questions. We're all afraid that when we hear someone say that they're suicidal or that they're cutting, to just kind of back off. I think it's probably evolutionarily adaptive that if someone is self-destructing to kind of pull away so you don't get pulled in. But that doesn't help them at all. And what actually helps is asking more specific questions. So even, saying, I know, so you say that if we break up or you kill yourself, do you have, and these are the questions we ask, like, do you have a plan of how you would do that? And then if the person says, yeah, I have, I have pills and I've kind of hoarded them so that I know what I could do. Okay. Have you practiced it? Like, have you ever tried it before? Yeah. The last time you didn't call me, I had them in my hand. And then you get a sense of how serious it is. And that's when you decide if you're going to call the person's family, if you're going to call a hotline and ask them what to do. There's a SAMHSA hotline. I'm sure you'll put links to that too. Or if you're going to say to them, oh, why don't we come up with a plan so that the next time you feel that, you can call this number, send me a text, and I'll call, an ambulance. You can be cursorily involved, but I really like the idea of creating a plan ahead of time, because then you're engaging the person and you're not responding just out of guilt and assumption of what's going to happen. Right. And so I would say like a little bit more engagement, which is not what we typically do when we're hearing that someone's acting that way. And then I said this in that episode, which is that no one can ever, the only person who can take their own life is that person. And if someone is committed to doing that, there isn't that much that we can do. We can, we haven't really figured out, we can keep them away from materials for a period of time that they might use, but when they will get released, they can do that. I mean, we really haven't figured it out because it is really up to the person. And so I would encourage this person to really connect and say, to find out more questions, say, what can I do to help you create a plan? But sticking with it is not a plan. Like, that's not a plan to help someone not kill themselves. It doesn't work. I mean, plenty of people have ended their lives who were in connected, healthy relationships. It's not really part of that. I mean, one of the only things that have seen to help is sometimes to say how much of an impact they would have on everyone. So think about your parents, think about your children. That seems to play into our need to be socially connected. So that sometimes would help. But I also think that you have to also understand that you are not powerful. You are not God. I think that's the other piece too, especially when someone puts us on this pedestal that we have this power. None of us are powerful enough to save another person's life,
right?
Including me.
Yeah, well, and that's such a good point. And for the, my heart hurts for both of the people in that relationship. The person who feels that someone's so important to them that without them, they might as well kill themselves. And then the person who feels they are the linchpin holding that person's life on this planet. Neither is true in the grand scheme of things, but obviously there's help needed. So I will also be sending him the link to our prior episode, because you did talk about, suicide. It's the episode on the perfect storm: anxiety, depression, COVID, and divorce. And that, all those coming together in the world we're in these days has increased the suicide rate, has increased the diagnoses of depression and anxiety.
Yeah. I guess I want to say also, falling in love and connecting to people puts every piece of us on the table, right? Like, we couldn't, because it sounds like, oh my God, that why would you ever, I mean, I'm just thinking to myself, like, why would you ever want to be with someone? This is so hard. This is so, but it's because with all the joy comes all the discomfort. I mean, we're both, right? We're complicated people. Like, this person that is saying they're afraid that they'll die without this person also has amazing characteristics that brought the person initially to them, right? I mean, and so I guess I just want to point that out when you're thinking about the person who's suffering, is that they're complex, just like you are complex. And so there is no black and white. I mean, I think a lot of people have been saying, like, Kim should leave him. She shouldn't leave him. It's very, very complicated. And just know, if you're in that situation, that it is very nuanced and complicated. So if you feel overwhelmed, this is why you can't do it yourself. You need to get the help of people who know what kind of tools to either help you or to help your partner.
Right. And that's such a significant factor in this, is you shouldn't try to do it alone. And you will exhaust both yourself and your reserves. One of the other factors, and I've experienced this one myself, and I am thinking of a close friend of mine who was
Mm,
married to someone who had a very difficult and out of control problem with alcohol.
mm,
And I mean, it was a tortuous road of
mm,
arrests and physical violence,
mm.
and promises to get better and then going to treatment and not. I mean, it was the typical tale. I hate to call it typical, but unfortunately that's a common story. But she would then come to me, her friend the divorce attorney, and say, but I don't want to divorce him because when
Yeah.
he's not under the influence, when he's himself, I love him so much. That is the person that I love. And what if he is able to get sober? What if he can put this behind him? Aren't I giving up on that? And so she
Yeah.
honestly stayed in that relationship and put her daughter
Mm,
through more than we'll talk about here, but who saw things that
mm,
shouldn't have had to see. And
mm.
out of that hope that it was going to get better. And I think that's a problem as well.
Yeah,
Because the person you love is both of those people, the person who's not under the influence or with a mental illness,
exactly.
and who they are when their illness is taking charge.
Exactly. So well said. I mean, first, I want to say that I want to honor hope that, so many people said to me, why are you still with him? Why are you still with him, with the person that I was with, who had alcoholism? And I couldn't help it. I couldn't help but have this hope. And that is a really amazing skill to have because especially in the times, right, we are in now, like being a hopeful person is really a beautiful characteristic. So I just want to say that first about your friend. um, and I really want to also point out again that nothing is one-sided. Everything is two ways. And so I had a lot of the similar thoughts, until I realized that he might get sober, but he sure as hell wasn't going to get sober with me. That there was just, I wasn't causing his drinking. I couldn't change his drinking and I can't cure it. But there was something within our dynamic that was making it even more difficult for him to get sober. And so this kind of waiting, and I know it so well, it's like there's, standing there waiting to see what's going to happen. Even that, like I'm pretending to look at my watch and looking up, that is a message that you're sending the person. In fact, right, her hoping he'll be different. Oh, it gives me like chills. That's sending him a message that he's not good enough how he is.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, she
Yeah.
meant only with the drinking, but a person you can't separate out like that.
Right.
And so it is, you know, and then, and again, there is no person, as you said, like there is no one person and another person. He is all that person. And essentially I'm going to accept this person warts and all. And if that means their alcoholism, I'm accepting their alcoholism. I mean, that's what you learn in codependent recovery. Like you lovingly detach, but you accept all of it. And so there is no waiting for the person to change. This is the person.
Right.
And so the question is, how are you with this person today? And man, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on this because do you know how many people between like dating and divorce, this idea of maybe they'll change, maybe they'll change. And I say this all the time. I say, people spend thousands of dollars with me to change, and some of them change this much.
Yeah.
Like it is so hard to change, right? Let alone with nothing. So, and again, like here's another piece for your friend, which is why this is the work that I do with people too. Like, why is it okay for you to be in a relationship where you're waiting for something different? What about being in a relationship where you don't have to focus on something changing because the baseline is just okay? I know we both have this in our relationships. Like they're the icing on the cake. They're
Yeah.
not the thing that we're waiting for either way. And so how do we get you to know you deserve that?
Yeah, that's actually the post that I posted today that
Mm,
had the response is, I'm trying to remember how I phrased it. Don't you deserve more than being with someone who doesn't treat you well? And I mean, it was, but we tend to, think that, hope that, want that. desire that things will change.
Yeah.
And instead of, I love what you just said about, accepting the whole person. And if their alcoholism or their bipolar disorder, or their depression or whatever is happening for that person is a
Yep.
part of them, is it something that you can live with, or
I
is
live
it
with.
something that's not the right mix for you?
And keep in mind, as we always talk about, Susan, if you have children, they will always be in your life. You will have to explain and help your kids understand this person's behavior. And another important piece, if you are divorcing someone who has a mental health issue, please work with someone individually so you can also get straight on what's happening with your kids. Because what ends up happening is your kid displays some erratic behavior that is completely developmentally appropriate. You assume they're like their parent. And then you go down this rabbit hole, and you start projecting your feelings. So you really need a lot of support. And yes, some mental health issues are genetic, but not every moment that your kid is displaying, again, a developmentally appropriate behavior is the sign of them being like their parent.
I have to, you talk about developmentally appropriate. So this is just a total aside, but it reminds me, and I think you'll get it, my mental health friend. My stepkids, I love you all. I'm going to say this to you before I tell this joke. My stepchildren just turned 23. And when I mentioned that to a friend, she goes, only one more year until their cerebral cortex is fully developed. She goes,
I know. I have some bad news. New research is showing like 26. So you got a few more years. But yes, right. Right. And
I'm like, only my mental health friends and divorce
could say that
would even know the joke, right?
Exactly. But I can speak, I've had spent a lot of sessions in my own personal therapy where my therapist says, here's your ex, here's your son. Even though he's acting like your ex when your ex was 40, your son's 14, being impulsive, and that's appropriate. That's the same. I mean, I have to do it all the time with my kids. Because otherwise I jump on behavior that is not, it's just developmentally appropriate. It's not warning signs, but I get really triggered by that. So I want people to know that. That's why it's so important to have some support when you have someone in your family or you yourself are going through this.
Yeah. And the support is really the key to all of this. You need the support while you're in the relationship. And if the relationship is ending for whatever reason,
yes,
getting some support so that you can deal with moving through the process of separating out and helping your children do it is really critical.
Key. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, Susan, right? So many people might think, oh, good, they're gone. This is over now, or I don't have to deal with the episodes, and no. First of all, you're still dealing with things. And I talk about this all the time as a psychologist. We have to process what happened in the past. Otherwise, you cannot clearly step into the future.
Yeah. Oh, and Beth McCormick, our mutual friend, who's a divorce attorney in Chicago, just posted something that said, if you don't deal with your hurts, they're going to play out with your prior hurts. They're going to play out in your future relationships. And I was like, you have to deal with the past to go forward. So I want to say to my members only community, I will be doing a separate private podcast for you guys on the legal aspects of dealing with mental health in divorce. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. It'll be in the members only community shortly. But Dr. Elizabeth, as always, it is always such a pleasure to have you on the show. And we're already talking about topics for future shows. So know everyone that she's not leaving forever, even though she has her own show now, and she's going to be a big author, best-selling author and all. She's coming back to talk to us all.
Always going to come back.
Always. So send your questions in, divorceandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And once again, tell everybody, do tell people. So if they pre-order the book,
so if you go to
the exciting news.
So if you go to drelizabethcohen.com, which is drelizabethcohen.com /book, and you pre-order the book there, you will get automatically registered for 3 amazing workshops that I'll be giving for free if you order the book, pre-order the book, on topics related to divorce, relating to processing righteous anger, and related to moving through to the next step. And these are things that have never been released that are totally exclusive for people who pre-order the book.
Yeah. So go pre-order the book. First off, you want the book anyway, but just to get these workshops with Dr. Elizabeth, you're going to have an opportunity to work with her. So go sign up, go get the pre-order of the book. I'm going to have, as always, all of the links, including to your prior episodes, in the show notes, and we will be seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.